this week just helped those who were taking part to just learn more about equity, to appreciate what equity is all about.
So equity, I would define it as providing to everyone according to their need. So simply means that if a certain area people need agriculture services, we provide them with agriculture services. If in another area people are more needy in terms of health services, we provide health services. But at the end goal of equity is making sure that everybody enjoys the same level of livelihood that everybody else enjoys. That's the essence of equity.
For me, equity is simple. Equity is simply a recognition that people are different. And that recognition then means that as you're thinking of how to treat people, then you don't treat them as if they are the same. You don't treat them as if they have the same needs or the same challenges. So for me, equity is really that recognition that anything that I do, I'm actually doing it to people who have very different and unique needs.
To start with history of a long time ago, anthropologists tell us that at least in the indigenous communities in what is now Kenya, as opposed to, for example, Uganda or bits of Tanzania or Nigeria, we didn't have much distinction between people. They were all treated equally. There was no hierarchy. There were no chiefs. So that most communities, which now make up the Republic of Kenya, lived in very egalitarian societies and had not heard of chiefs until the British colonial powers came. Is the start of colonialism, whereby the British assumed responsibility, that's the word they used, but really they subjugated the people of very many diverse communities under British rule. And so colonialism brought immediately distinctions, differences between different people, different groups. The immediate distinctions, of course, were between Europeans and Indians, some of whom had been here a long time, some came after with colonialism, and of course the indigenous people. And then we had independence, and we thought perhaps now we will really have equality, everybody will be treated. The concept of citizenship then began to take root, but that didn't happen, as we know. And this time it didn't happen because some African leaders, including the distinguished Jomo Kenyatta, had their own ideas. And it was an idea of tribalism, which had not been a major issue until really independence, in a manner of speaking. And so we had a new kind of classifications, hierarchies, and that created distinction between not only Europeans and Indians and Africans, but between different African communities.
Equity is an appreciation of the differences within our society. When I talk about differences, I talk about differences, demographic differences. I talk about differences, geographical differences. For example, what is the state of access to water in Ward A versus Ward B? That is what equity is about, appreciating differences. Once we appreciate differences, we have to relate this to the fact that we have scarce resources and we have to prioritize how do we divide resources to meet these differences. Okay? So we have to put at the back of our mind that equity concerns getting to a society where people have equal opportunities, where people have access to services, all right? So once, that is the end goal, to get to a point where people have equal opportunities. But equity is about the process of getting there, appreciating these differences, going to the drawing board, negotiating and discussing in a fair process how can we deal with these differences and which ones do we deal with first, which are the most urgent, and then going to deal with them and always reflecting how far have we come from the point we started. That is what equity is about.
So, you know, for equity, you're pretty much looking at each individual unit and thinking of what is the unique need that each of them has. And so when you're thinking about policy, when you're thinking about access to, you know, government services and goods, then you're already taking that into account. But equality, many ways, is really defined as to everyone you give the same. So, and there are many people who push for that. We've seen MCAs push for that. So they say each ward should get the same. So equality looks nice. It looks easy to do. It's actually very easy to do, because all you need to do is make sure just you're giving, as you know, a similar thing or a similar service to everyone. But in many ways, the challenge with equality is that you end up sometimes creating more inequality than when you actually thought you were sorting it out. So the difference for me is simply the fact that in one, you have to really think through how unique and how different are the people that I'm dealing with. And in the other one, all you need to think of is what do I have and how do I distribute it equally to everyone? And I think those two concepts definitely are very different.
So I would say that in a way, equality is the end goal. What do we mean by equality? What we mean by equality is not that everybody is the same, no, but it's that everybody enjoys the same quality, the same quantity of public services. Therefore, equity then becomes a means to get to equality, in a sense, in that way of defining it. So equity means that for you to be able to make sure that everybody enjoys the same service quality, the same quantity of services, then you have to take different approaches for this. So equity means that you are addressing different needs according to those needs, so that at the end, everybody's needs have been met. So as I said earlier, if in a certain area, people enjoy very good access to health services, but the education system is in a mess, you fix the education system. But you will go to a different area and find that actually there, the problem is not education, it's actually healthcare. You fix that. So you see, your mechanism is not equal. You are differentiating how you make approach, but the end result is that these two people actually enjoy good health services and good education services.
Equity has to do with the process of getting to the point of equality. That's the relationship. That we have to first put in mechanisms that cannot, unless data otherwise shows, be similar or cannot be equal to get to the point where everyone is in a position to access services, to reach their full potential. So if you want to say that men and women at some point should have equal access to education or to health services, we have to deal with it equitably so we get to that point.
So if you read the Constitution, next time you read the Constitution, underline the word equity and equitable. And you will find equity appears 4 times, equitable appears 14 times. So clearly equitable was seen to be important because equality means that you get the same treatment. But equal treatment may not always be a fair treatment. Because if you have a very rich person and a very poor person, and to say you both get, let's say, 200 shillings a month from the government for old age, well, that's not really fair. One person is a multi-millionaire, other person is starving. So equity had this notion that you have to look at the overall picture. And you see that some counties are doing quite well, that some counties need more assistance because of their historical backwardness, deprivation, and so on. And so equity has this kind of broader notion, and that is why it appears 14 times. I bet you won't find a constitution in the entire world which has equity even once, but leave aside 14 times. So we were very committed to that.
We saw John talk about principles of equity when he talked about the need principle, that we give more to those who need more, isn't it? Or we give less to those who have more capacity. So this week just helped those who were taking part to just learn more about equity, to appreciate what equity is all about. So I would say most of the week was dedicated to understanding what is equity and what does it mean in the society that we live in.
Now, the first thing that you have to think of, and this is the main thing that really drives how we determine how to distribute resources, is the need. Every county is unique. Even when you come to the county level, every ward is unique. Now, our devolution was trying to achieve two things at the same go. Number one, we wanted to bring decision making on how we spend money very close to the people. So that's very important. So the first thing that we have to think about when we are thinking of this principle of need is that we have to make sure that we are able to fund ongoing services. If there is a clinic, we want to make sure that clinic is still able to run. But the second objective with devolution was that we were dealing with a lot of marginalization in the country. And so we were looking at devolution as a way out in terms of redistributing our resources and making sure that devolution plays a catch-up role in terms of bringing counties that are marginalized to enjoy the same level of services as the rest of the country. So there are lots of development deficits that exist in the country. And so the second thing you have to think about need is who is left behind and how do we make sure that we allocate resources in a way that that ward that is behind is able to enjoy the same level of services as the other wards in the county. Now, the second principle that we have to think about is fiscal capacity. Fiscal capacity just simply means how much money are you able to raise on your own as a county. Because if you're able to raise more, maybe you're able to fund more of your services than the next county that cannot raise as much. So if we are trying to be fair, then that's one of the things that we have to think about. Now, the challenge, there's a negative incentive to this, as you can quickly tell. Because if I'm going to give you more money because you collect less, you have every reason not to collect a lot. So how do we deal with that negative incentive? It takes me to the third principle, which we call it physical effort. Physical effort simply means, for those who are very prudent in how they use their resources, probably you might think about rewarding them in some way in your distribution factors. Now, the good thing about physical effort is that it takes away how much you collect to how much you grow what you collect. Now, the fourth principle is efficiency. And this is something that has to do more with how much do you produce with the money that you put into certain services, with the money that you put into certain programs. Those who are very efficient in the use of their resources, even in our own household, sometimes end up being the ones that you give most of your money to. Now, this principle is a very risky one. If all of you have heard of the session paper number 10 of 1965, it was pegged on a big way on a principle of efficiency. We believed if we put money in areas that are very productive, we are able to produce way more as a country, then we'll redistribute it to the areas that are low potential. How we applied it definitely did not do that. But that is something that is applied in some countries in the world and they've made it work. How we applied ours definitely did not work. Now, the fifth principle is a very basic one. And the fifth principle says regardless of the unique nature in each of the wards that you have, or regardless of the unique nature in each of the counties, that every region requires some minimum share of what we are distributing so that at least they're able to continue providing some level of service. So simply because there's one that is not, looks very rich, or there's a ward that looks like they don't really fit the bill for a lot of resources to go to them, but still they require some minimum allocation that will make sure that they are able to still continue running. The last one, and I think this is the most important one, especially from where I sit, this is a very important one. And this one simply says that regardless of the approach that you take, it has to be done through a fair process. So the sixth principle is basically fair process. Even if you come up with the best formula in the world, and you come up with one that produces the best, makes sure everyone has everything, if the process by which you arrived at that mechanism of distribution is not seen to be fair, then you're in trouble. We are now working on our CIDPs, 2017 to 2022. Is that process inclusive? Is that process open? Is that process following and thinking through all the other principles that we have been discussing, plus others? These six are basically just what we've seen in terms of global good practice. But there could be some unique thing within Elgeyo Marakwet that you say there's a very important thing here that we'd also like to make sure we are considering as we do this work. So the fair process principle is also very important, and that comes in very quickly as we'll be preparing our CIDPs.